All kids out of the pool.
Don't hold anything back now!
I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
Have you ever looked back on something from your childhood, or something that fills you with nostalgia, and end up unraveling a new mystery about it that you never knew before? Let's set the stage here. It's 2005 and you're in your room. You got your favorite TV channels playing in the background, video game systems hooked up to the TV, and maybe a few popular toys from that era scattered around. But if you were like me, then you were also into trading card games that were popular at the time. I was more of a Pokemon card fan myself, but I did have some Yu-Gi-Oh cards, though most were just from starter decks or were Shonen Jump promos. Still, I knew about the tournament prizes or cards given out at the movies, stuff like that, but never anything rarer. Well, now, fast forward 20 years, and say you find yourself in your room on YouTube as an aging millennial, watching a random assortment of content trying to fix your sleep schedule, when a video comes up that blows your mind. A story about a set of Yu-Gi-Oh cards so rare they remained undocumented for decades, and still elude collectors to this day. The question is then posed, however, about whether or not all of these cards actually exist, or if some are only an urban legend and were never actually printed. Cards that both you and me could have seen or bought from the store, but apparently few people did, and thus has begun a trading card tale. Like I said, I was recently on YouTube and was watching Team APS videos, and one of the features I like about this channel is the fact that they don't just talk about the card game specifically, but expand their range to culture, lore, and obscure products. And just by chance, I happened to come across one of their shorts from a couple years ago, called "Did You Know About the Fabled Yu-Gi-Oh Mattel Cards That Might Not Even Exist?" As a fan of undocumented merchandise, I had to give this a watch. And the short goes on to describe a set of Yu-Gi-Oh action figures that came packaged with cards depicting said figure. These cards were exclusive to the toys, in that they featured a special parallel holofoil pattern and had unique card numbers noting they were from this set. But where things get interesting is exactly how they were released. As legend states, the figures with the cards were only available in Sears stores for a short period of time, before the cards were removed from later releases of the figures. The cardless figures are somewhat easy to find, but not the ones with the cards. And apparently, those original versions with the cards were so rare that photos of them hadn't even made their way online for 15 years, until eventually a collection of the cards did, and were sold for $80,000 on eBay, with one of them still having never resurfaced to this day. Whoa, okay, hold up. So you're telling me that a toy that could have been bought from a store at one point in time by literally anyone who went there has now become so rare that the cards are valued at $80,000 and one of them still hasn't been seen? I was shocked at this revelation and began to wonder, how could the figures really be that rare? Are people just not looking in the right places for them? These were sold at retail. There's no way only one set of them exists. To answer these questions and more, I have some answers and research to share as we take a deep dive into a card set that literally any one of us could have bought 20 years ago, but didn't. Okay, let's start at the beginning and form a timeline for what exactly it is we're dealing with here, and how the information was gathered. When Yu-Gi-Oh! GX first started airing on American television, Mattel, the license holder for the series, released figures into retail stores that depicted some of the main monsters from the show, like the elemental heroes. There are some mini statue-type figures that do not include cards, larger deluxe monsters that do have cards, which are part of the set and have been documented, but then the main line which is our focus. These ones are called 360-degree joint figures, a series of posable characters that are known for their articulation and action feature, which allows for their limbs to be removed and swapped between different characters. Based on my research of the line, there were 3 waves of characters which were released in sets of 4, so there are a total of 12 characters. And this means by association, there should be a total of 12 cards in the Mattel set, if each figure came with its own card. Fast forward 7 years on the internet, in 2012. It was in a thread on the Pojo.com forums, where user Maykite makes a post titled "Cyber Dragon promo from Mattel." It reads, "I am currently trying to collect every rarity of Cyber Dragon, and his reprints in every deck, pack, etc. However, I find myself stumped at this promo they had with Mattel, released with a Cyber Dragon toy. I cannot find the single card anywhere on places like eBay and Troll and Toad. I even bought the toy itself, but no card. Does this card even exist, or does anyone have it? Please help." This is followed by replies in the thread that sort of form the lore surrounding this card, with the mention that these toys were only sold at Sears, and that later releases of the figures took the cards out, as we have heard. From this point onward, it seemed like the interest, or at least questions surrounding these cards, fell back into obscurity, until around 2020, when a Reddit thread showed up that discussed this set, and even cited the original thread as a source of information. Even at this point, there were still no photos of the card online, but bounties had allegedly already been placed on the card, with one claiming to be for $3,000. So for the next year, speculation persisted, with some users believing the cards were never printed for the figures, while others were convinced they were just holy grails of collecting, due to the scarcity of their release. And then, only a year after this thread, another one would show up that changed the entire story. User Loser Chris created their own thread called Parallel Rare Cards from MF03. This is the identifier for the Mattel set. It says, "Just found some old Yu-Gi-Oh cards while digging through my closet. These were from a very long time ago. I don't even remember where I got them. Wondering if any of you here would happen to know the rarity of these cards. I looked them up on Google and they seem to be decently rare. Mattel Action Figure Promos Series 3. So I was wondering if anyone can confirm. The cards have been in a binder for over 10 years and are near mint condition." They listed each card in their possession, which included the fabled Cyber Dragon. After a series of back and forths and more pictures, the card was the first ever Mattel Cyber Dragon card that had been documented online. And then speculation surrounding its value and rarity started to overtake the mythic status of the card. According to an unlisted video by the same user who made the Reddit thread and owned the cards, Cyber Dragon, Elemental Hero Clayman, and Elemental Hero Avian were all auctioned off in early 2021, their total value accumulating to around $50,000 US, with Cyber Dragon being $30,000 in itself. So this brings us to the modern day, 2025. We've seen a Cyber Dragon card and might never see another one, so the story is over, right? Well, not really. Because while we finally did get an image of that one card, this is where I took a much closer look at the history of these toys and their release, and have come across many revelations that change the narrative put forth about these cards. But before we talk about the set as a whole in a modern light, there was a different card from the set that initially caught my attention from the Team APS short, and from someone in the comments on Reddit. While Cyber Dragon was still a hot commodity when it was first found, the comments of this thread point out another rarity of this set, the Blackluster Soldier card. Previous to Cyber Dragon's reveal, speculation regarding both of these cards came into question, as some users thought that neither of them had released, and the figures just came out without the cards. Since one user states the figures are not even rare. So if Blackluster Soldier was really not that rare, couldn't I just find it on Google? So I began using the classic search method on Google Images, just looking for Blackluster Soldier figures. I actually didn't know modern companies were making new Yu-Gi-Oh products for the older monsters, so after shifting through these recent results, I actually wasn't left with much, coming up empty-handed. That's kinda weird. I can't seem to find the figure from the back of the packaging. I already sorta knew that getting a hit on the actual figure with the card in the packaging was going to be a monumental task, or I'd have to get very lucky. But the fact that I couldn't even find a normal figure of this character seemed kinda odd. Back in the early 2000s, Mattel actually did release a figure of Blackluster Soldier, but that one was from the original Yu-Gi-Oh line. The one we're looking for specifically is from Yu-Gi-Oh GX, and would have branding from this set on it. So I tried looking a little harder, using better keywords related to the 360 joint name and the year of the line's release, even expanding my search to eBay listings, in the event that someone might have had one up. But still, I found nothing. Then I tried WorthPoint, thinking that there might have been older lots with the figure in it that were sold much closer to the line's release back then. There weren't that many results that were pulled up, but even in what did, I still found nothing. I started scratching my head at this point, because even some of the rarest releases from this line, like Elemental Hero Bubble Man, which were indeed very hard to come across, card or not, could still be found in some capacity, mostly on obscure selling websites, but it was out there. However, when it came to Blackluster Soldier, there was just nothing. I thought it was odd that the whole line had been documented in figure form except for him, which made me come up with the theory that it was possible maybe he was just a cancelled figure and never actually came out. Well, that actually wouldn't be the first time Mattel has done something like that, and we can look to the anime-adjacent Naruto line to see another example of that. In a couple of the later waves of the series, there are figures shown on the back of the packaging that were cancelled before release, even one in the very last wave. I am convinced at this point, based on the lack of search results, that the figures simply did not come out, and therefore the MF03 card that he would have been printed with likely never existed either. And I believe the people on Reddit who recalled seeing him or saying he wasn't very rare were confusing it with the older figure from the original line, and not the GX one. But at this point in the video, we should be asking ourselves, is Blackluster Soldier really the holy grail card that everyone thinks it is? Because while I was searching for this figure, I came across another discovery that no one had pointed out online in modern times. It hit me as I started seeing some of the other figures show up over and over again, and that realization is that I never came across a level 10 Winged Karibo card. You can find loose versions of the figure, or boxed versions, but none with his card, or the loose card. I thought this was so strange. For all the time I spent looking for Blackluster Soldier, I never even realized that this one was missing too. But it gets even weirder than this, because similarly, Ancient Gear Golem is in the exact same spot as Karibo. You can find the figure without the card, but the card has never been seen, in the package or loose. So now we have two known figures that released that have not been seen with their cards, on top of Blackluster Soldier, who doesn't seem to exist at all. All of this information brings us back to the original hype monster that gave this set publicity, Cyber Dragon. Because, just as I could not find a sealed figure with a card for Karibo or Ancient Gear Golem, I also could not find a single photo of a sealed Cyber Dragon with its card. You can find versions without the card, but again, nothing with it. And what's even stranger about this is that, as we've seen, a parallel holo for Cyber Dragon does exist. So even after 20 years and seeing the card itself, we haven't seen one in that packaging and only as a loose item. What the hell is going on here to account for all these inconsistencies? Well, some of our answers are hidden in plain sight, on a site we visited before, Pojo.com. Originally, when I was doing research for this video, I thought that the 2012 thread that mentioned Cyber Dragon was the first one online to really discuss the Mattel set. But actually, if you dig really far into the site, there are threads from a couple years previous that discuss them as well. But it doesn't stop there, as there are even older threads, one from 2006, around the time the toys actually came out, with 13 pages of information to absorb. As far as I could find, this basically was the first time these were discussed, and is the best primary source out there for the toys in depth, revealing very useful information to us. It was made by user Skytreader in September 2006, and starts by outright stating that when they went to their Toys R Us, they bought a handful of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX figures with their cards included. While all of the ones listed here are the ones that can be seen online, it debunks the previous statement that these figures were exclusive to Sears, at least the set as a whole. I was under the impression through information passed around that their rarity was directly connected to their retail release, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And what's more is that Winged Karibo, Gear Golem, Blackluster Soldier, then Cyber Dragon and Clayman were not seen at this store, and is where things start to get a little more interesting. I read through this whole thread, eagerly awaiting the moment when someone was going to post about finding Cyber Dragon. However, that moment never came. For the entirety of this thread, users would occasionally ask if anyone had found Cyber Dragon yet, and this lasted all the way into early 2007. Eventually, Skytreader, who seemed to have connections to the industry, would first state that Cyber Dragon and the rest of the figures that had yet to come out were pushed back in their release, before stating they were indefinitely delayed, and then concluded in March 2007 by stating the remaining figures were not going to be mass released, though he did not say they were cancelled altogether. But the thread ends there, and there was no other discussion about the figures at this time. And the next time they were brought up, it was in those early 2010s threads that asked about the missing cards. So by taking a closer look at these threads, it does reveal the earliest rumblings that Cyber Dragon as a figure, and not the whole line, was exclusive to Sears stores, and was extremely rare, even in 2010. Then on top of that, and even in the 2006 thread, there were claims from other users that state they had seen or knew of people that owned the Cyber Dragon card, but no photos were shared at that time, and depending on the year of the claim, it does contradict with what Skytreader was reporting at the time, how the figure was delayed. If there's one thing for sure about these figures after reading through all these threads, it's the fact that even collectors back in the mid and late 2000s were not entirely sure how they were released, or why they were so hard to find. While it's very, very difficult to know for sure what happened to the missing cards, based on my research of this line and understanding of toy companies, I can make some educated guesses.
Yu-Gi-Oh! GX will continue in a moment on Toonami. And now, back to Yu-Gi-Oh! GX on Toonami.
Starting from the top, Black Luster Soldier. I don't think that card was ever printed or the figure ever released. Every other figure from this entire line has been spotted at least once in the wild, card or not, but never the Black Luster Soldier. And once again, those comments in the old Reddit threads that state they've seen the figure, I believe they're referring to the older one from the original series. I have never seen a GX branded figure, and nobody in those old forums even mentions the toy in any capacity. Not to mention Skytreader's comment that said the later waves were not going to be released to the masses. This implies the line was not selling well, or they had little confidence in it. So I believe BLS was probably cut before he was actually made. Next, as for the legitimacy of Cyber Dragon, whether or not he actually came from a figure pack or if he's just a hoax entirely, I do believe this card is real for a few different reasons. Firstly, we know without a doubt that the Cyber Dragon figure did release, despite being heavily delayed, so he is not in a situation like Black Luster Soldier where the figure or card does not exist. And while Skytreader points out that older waves originally did not come with the cards and then got them added later, contrary to popular belief, this should not have affected Cyber Dragon in any way, as he was a late release. The claims his card was pulled after release check out, given the card's rarity and Sears being the only place you could get it, as is corroborated by those 2010s threads. I wish I could have found more proof that Sears was the spot he was sold at, but you could substitute Sears with any other non-toy store and the theory still makes sense. But there's something else to point out in relation to the Cyber Dragon card that proves its authenticity, and it isn't even found within the card itself. As I was putting together this video, I realized that I didn't come across any other copies of the MF03 Elemental Hero Clayman. I believe the Cyber Dragon seller was the first person to show a copy of this card too, but nobody really pointed that out or cared because it's not Cyber Dragon. And you'd think if this was some kind of PR stunt, they would have faked Cyber Dragon and BLS or something, not Clayman. But it doesn't stop just here, because guess what? There are currently no photos online of a boxed Clayman with his card. He's in the exact same spot as Cyber Dragon. And both of these figures were originally missing from shelves in Skytreader's 2006 report. They were both late release figures, heavily delayed figures, and Loser Chris had both cards. I don't think that's a coincidence. And guess who else's cards have also not shown up in boxed form? Karibo and Ancient Gear Golem. Two more figures from Skytreader's list that were missing when the line originally came out. Even their loose cards haven't shown up yet. So basically what I'm getting at is that all of the characters listed in this 2006 post that were delayed have never been seen boxed with their cards, and only 2 of these 5 cards have been seen loose in the wild at all, and that was only once and both were owned by the same person. To me, it seems like all 5 of these characters sort of make up a lost wave. And with the exception of Blackluster Soldier, the MF03 card figures ended up as late release figures produced in small quantities, then dumped into Sears stores for a short time. There must have been so few of them put into the wild to cause this, because it's not as big of an issue with any of the other monsters. So that leaves Karibo and Ancient Gear Golem, and the mystery surrounding their cards. Do I think MF03 cards were made for them? Yes, I do. And do I think they're lost, still out there in the wild, waiting to be uncovered? Yes, I do. Given all the information and context we know about this line after researching it, and the history of the other 2 cards that showed up, it's extremely likely. At least, it seems like there's more evidence suggesting they do, rather than they don't. And all 4 of them being part of that lost wave makes sense. And I think it would be stranger if these 2 didn't get cards. Meanwhile, every other released monster did. In fact, if that Cyber Dragon never even showed up, I bet people would still be doubting his existence to this day. And the only other bit of information I came across when wrapping up my search was YouTube user Casual Yugi Stuff, who actually opened an Elemental Hero Burstinatrix figure that came with a card. And shockingly, a checklist of all the cards in the set were included with the figures. Here, we can see every documented card in addition to the ones that are still lost. While I don't think it adds any evidence to suggest one way or another if the cards were produced, as plans and releases changed throughout the line, it is very interesting to see Mattel officially acknowledge their plans from this early point. The release of these toys was so confusing, and the number of years this mystery has been ongoing makes the information so scattered and hard to keep track of. It's probably one of the most bizarre merchandise mysteries I have ever looked into, and it's still a little frustrating just trying to understand it all. Hopefully we can get some more information about this mysterious line of figures as more news spreads about them. But until next time, Finn.
A true ninja always stays on top of their training, just as a true viewer stays up to date with the latest videos. So, why not grab another cup of green tea and watch some more? I'd stick around this digital dimension myself, but I gotta get back to my teammates. See you in the next chapter.